The turbulence hit without warning. Isabella Williams gripped the armrest of seat 14C as the plane lurched sideways, her laptop sliding across the tray table. Coffee from the passenger beside her splashed onto her thrift store blouse. The same one she'd worn to 3 job interviews this week. The same one that still smelled faintly of the hospital disinfectant that had become her second perfume. "Sorry, sorry," the businessman muttered, dabbing at his spilled drink with a napkin that did nothing for the stain spreading across her white shirt. "It's fine," Bella lied, because what else could she say? That this was her only interview shirt, that she'd been wearing it to every meeting because the other blouses in her closet had holes she couldn't afford to replace. The plane steadied, and she returned to her laptop screen, to the document that had consumed the last 3 hours of the flight from Chicago to New York. Her mother's medical bills stared back at her in neat rows of devastating numbers. Chemotherapy, $47,000. Surgery, $32,000. Hospital stay, $18,000. The total at the bottom made her stomach clench harder than the turbulence ever could. $127,000. Even with insurance, even with the payment plan, even with the 3 part-time jobs she juggled around law school, the numbers didn't add up. They never added up. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How did the interview go, sweetheart?" Bella stared at the message, her thumbs hovering over the keyboard. How could she explain that she'd spent 4 hours in a waiting room for a 15-minute conversation with a junior associate who'd already decided she wasn't worth their time? How could she tell her mother that the prestigious internship opportunity had been nothing more than unpaid filing work for a firm that specialized in representing the kind of wealthy clients who saw people like them as barely worth noticing? Still waiting to hear back, she typed instead, "To focus on getting better. Love you." 3 dots appeared immediately. "I love you too. Don't worry about the bills. We'll figure it out." Bella closed her eyes. Her mother had been saying that for 6 months, ever since the diagnosis, ever since their world had collapsed into a series of appointment rooms and insurance calls and sleepless nights, where Bella calculated and recalculated numbers that refused to cooperate. We'll figure it out," as if hope could pay for chemotherapy, as if determination could cover surgery costs. The plane began its descent into LaGuardia, and Bella packed her laptop with the mechanical precision of someone who'd made this trip too many times. Chicago to New York and back again, chasing opportunities that turned to dust the moment she walked into rooms full of people who'd never had to choose between textbooks and groceries. She was reaching for her bag in the overhead compartment when she heard it. "Not my fault the little bitch couldn't keep her mouth shut." The voice came from the row behind her, low and angry. Bella froze, her hand still gripping her bag handle. "Richard, lower your voice," another man replied, his tone sharp with warning. "Why? It's a private jet." "Or it was supposed to be, until your precious Stephen decided to fly commercial to connect with regular people." The first voice, Richard, practically spat the words. "God, I can't wait until this whole thing blows over and we can get back to real business." Bella's bag was stuck. She tugged gently, trying not to draw attention to herself, but the zipper was caught on something. She was trapped, standing in the aisle, forced to listen. "The Moore Industries scandal won't just blow over," the second voice continued. "Stephen's reputation is destroyed. The board is breathing down his neck. Congress wants hearings. This is exactly what we needed." "And you're sure he can't trace it back to us?" "How could he? The evidence all points to him. The falsified reports, the missing environmental data, the bribes to the regulatory officials. It's all in his name. All in his authorization." Bella's blood went cold. She knew about the Moore Industries scandal. Everyone did. It had been front-page news for weeks. a tech giant accused of covering up environmental damage from their manufacturing facilities, of bribing officials to look the other way while they poisoned groundwater in 3 states. Stephen Moore, the reclusive billionaire CEO, had become the face of corporate corruption overnight. But these men were talking about it like they'd orchestrated it, like they'd framed him. The beautiful thing, Richard continued, is that Stephen's so focused on trying to prove his innocence, he'll never see the hostile takeover coming. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll control the board, and he'll be out on his ass with nothing but his daddy's trust fund to keep him warm. Her bag came free suddenly, and Bella stumbled backward, bumping into the passenger behind her. "Watch it!" the woman snapped. "Sorry," Bella whispered, but her mind was reeling. She moved toward the front of the plane, her legs unsteady, her thoughts spinning. Stephen Moore was innocent, and she was the only person who knew. The passengers were beginning to file off the plane, but Bella hung back, pretending to organize her things while her mind raced. She glanced back at the 2 men, trying to memorize their faces. Richard was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from expensive marble. His companion was younger, dark-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her semester's tuition. They didn't look like criminals. They looked like board members, like executives, like the kind of men who destroyed lives with spreadsheets and smiles. The plane had nearly emptied when Bella finally gathered the courage to move. She walked slowly toward the exit, her mind still spinning with what she'd heard. At the jetway, she paused, looking back one more time. Richard and his companion were still in their seats, heads bent over a tablet, completely absorbed in whatever they were planning next. Neither of them looked up as she passed. Bella made it halfway through the terminal before she realized she was shaking. She found a bathroom and locked herself in a stall, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Stephen Moore's name filled her Google search results. Dozens of articles about the scandal, about the congressional hearings scheduled for next week, about the environmental damage that had made him the most hated man in America. But he was innocent. She had proof, sort of. She leaned against the stall door, her mind racing through possibilities. She could go to the police, but what would she say? That she'd overheard a conversation on a plane. Without names, without details, without any real evidence beyond her word, against 2 powerful men. She could go to the media, but she was nobody, a broke law student with no connections and no credibility. Who would believe her? And even if they did, by the time any investigation was launched, it would be too late. The hearings were next week. Stephen Moore's life would be destroyed. Bella stared at her reflection in her phone screen, at the tired eyes and coffee-stained shirt, and the weight of impossible choices. She thought about her mother in that hospital bed, about the bills that kept coming, about the future that seemed to be slipping away, one unpaid invoice at a time. She thought about Stephen Moore, a man she'd never met, whose life was being destroyed by the same kind of people who'd dismissed her without a second glance just hours ago. And she thought about justice, about the difference between what was legal and what was right, about the oath she'd someday take as a lawyer, if she ever got the chance. Her phone buzzed. Another text from her mother. "Whatever happens with the internship, I'm proud of you. You're stronger than you know." Bella closed her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. Stephen Moore stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, watching the city spread out below him like a circuit board of lights and possibilities. Manhattan at night used to fill him with energy, with the intoxicating sense that anything was possible. Now, it just reminded him how far he had to fall. "The board meeting is tomorrow," his assistant, Marcus, said from somewhere behind him. "The legal thinks we should consider a plea deal." Stephen didn't turn around. "A plea deal for crimes I didn't commit?" "Stephen, I didn't do it, Marcus." His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was steel underneath. I didn't falsify those environmental reports. I didn't bribe anyone. I didn't cover up contamination that killed people's pets and poisoned their water. I know that. You know that. But the evidence was planted. Stephen finally turned, his reflection ghosting across the window. At 35, he looked older than his years, the stress of the last 6 months etched in the lines around his eyes. Someone very smart and very ruthless has spent a lot of time and money making me look guilty. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Do you have any idea who? That was the question that kept Stephen awake at night. Who hated him enough to orchestrate something this elaborate? Who had the access to plant evidence in his personal files, to forge his digital signature on documents he'd never seen, to create a trail of corruption so convincing that even he'd started to doubt his own memory? Could be anyone, Stephen said. Board members who want me out, competitors who want to see more industries destroyed, politicians who need a scapegoat for their own failures. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Hell, it could be my own brother for all I know. James hasn't spoken to me since the scandal broke. Stephen moved to his desk, to the stack of legal documents that had become his constant companion. Neither has anyone else in my family. Amazing how quickly people distance themselves when your name becomes toxic. The office felt too quiet, too empty. A year ago, this floor had been buzzing with activity, meetings and phone calls, and the controlled chaos of building something that mattered. Now it was just Stephen and Marcus, and the ghosts of a company that was slowly dying under the weight of public outrage. The protesters are back, Marcus said quietly. Stephen nodded. He'd seen them from his window, dozens of people with signs demanding justice for the families affected by the contamination. Families who had every right to be angry, who deserved answers and accountability and someone to blame for their suffering. They just had the wrong someone. Sir. Marcus was looking at him with concern. Maybe you should go home early tonight. You've been here since 5 this morning. Home. Stephen almost laughed. Home was a penthouse apartment that felt more like a mausoleum than a place to live. Home was silence and expensive furniture and the kind of isolation that money couldn't fix. I'm fine, he said automatically. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, which meant it was probably another death threat or a reporter trying to get a quote for tomorrow's character assassination. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Same number. On the third call, curiosity got the better of him. Stephen Moore, Mr. Moore. The voice was young, female, nervous. My name is Isabella Williams. I need to talk to you about the environmental scandal. Stephen's grip tightened on the phone. If you're a reporter, I'm not. I'm a law student, and I have information that could help you. He'd heard this before. Dozens of people had called claiming to have evidence that would clear his name. They were usually conspiracy theorists or opportunists looking for money or attention, but something in this woman's voice made him pause. What kind of information? Not over the phone. Her voice was steadier now, more determined. Can you meet me somewhere, tonight? Stephen looked out at the protesters below, at the signs demanding his head on a platter. Miss Williams, I appreciate whatever you think you can do, but Richard Blackwood and Thomas Chen, she said quickly. Do those names mean anything to you? The world stopped. Stephen knew those names. Richard Blackwood was on Moore Industries, board of directors, a silver-haired shark who'd been pushing for Stephen's resignation since the scandal broke. Thomas Chen was the company's chief financial officer, a man Stephen had trusted with his company's most sensitive information. Where do you want to meet? Stephen asked. The coffee shop was nearly empty at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Just a few students with laptops and a barista who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Isabella Williams sat in the corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she hadn't touched, her eyes fixed on the door like she was expecting someone to burst through and arrest her. She'd been here for 20 minutes, second-guessing every decision that had led to this moment. What if Stephen Moore was exactly what the media said he was? What if she was about to meet with a criminal who'd poisoned children's drinking water for profit? What if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, but every time she considered leaving, she thought about those voices on the plane, about the casual cruelty in Richard's tone when he talked about destroying a man's life? Whatever Stephen Moore had or hadn't done, he deserved to know he was being framed. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see a man scanning the coffee shop with sharp, intelligent eyes. She recognized him from the photos in the news articles, but he looked different in person, taller, more imposing, with an energy that seemed barely contained. He wore jeans and a dark sweater instead of the expensive suits she'd seen in the media, but there was no mistaking who he was. Stephen Moore looked like a man who was used to owning every room he entered. Even now, even with his reputation in ruins, he carried himself with a confidence that was almost magnetic. Their eyes met across the coffee shop, and Bella felt her breath catch. She'd expected someone older, someone who looked like the corporate villain the media had painted him as. She hadn't expected someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread, all sharp cheekbones and dark eyes, and the kind of presence that made the air in the room feel suddenly thin. He walked over to her table with the fluid grace of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. And when he spoke, his voice was deeper than it had been on the phone. Isabella Williams. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Thank you for calling." He slid into the booth across from her, his movements careful and controlled. "I have to ask, are you recording this conversation?" "No." The word came out as barely a whisper. "Good!" His eyes never left her face, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her. "Now, tell me about Richard Blackwood and Thomas Chen." Bella took a shaky breath and began to speak. She told him about the flight, about the conversation she'd overheard, about the way they'd talked about framing him like it was just another business transaction. She watched his face as she spoke, saw the way his jaw tightened when she mentioned the hostile takeover, the way his hands clenched when she repeated Richard's words about getting him out on his ass. When she finished, the coffee shop felt eerily quiet. "You're sure it was them?" Stephen's voice was carefully neutral. "I saw their faces. I could identify them." Bella's hands were shaking now, and she pressed them flat against the table. "Mr. Moore, I know this sounds crazy, but they're setting you up. Everything you're being accused of, they did it. They used your name, your authorization codes, your reputation to cover their tracks." Stephen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on something she couldn't see. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked finally. The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "You could have gone to the police, the media. Made a name for yourself as the whistleblower who brought down the corrupt billionaire." His smile was sharp, bitter. "Instead, you called me directly. Why?" Bella stared at him, realizing she didn't have a good answer. "Because it was the right thing to do." "The right thing." He repeated the words like they were foreign to him. When was the last time someone did the right thing just because it was right? She didn't know how to respond to that. Stephen leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Miss Williams, do you have any idea how many people have approached me in the last 6 months, claiming to have information that would clear my name? Do you know how many of them turned out to be looking for money or attention or their 15 minutes of fame? I'm not all of them," he continued. "Every single one. So forgive me if I'm skeptical of your motives." Bella felt her cheeks burn. "I don't want money. Everyone wants money. Not everyone. She met his eyes, her voice stronger now. I want justice. I want the truth to matter. I want the people who actually poisoned those communities to be held accountable instead of watching an innocent man get destroyed for their crimes. Something shifted in Stephen's expression. Mada, you really believe I'm innocent? Yes. Based on a conversation you overheard on a plane. Based on the way they talked about you. The way they laughed about what they'd done to you. Bella's voice was gaining strength. I've spent 3 years in law school, Mr. Moore. I know what guilt sounds like. I know what calculated malice sounds like. And I know the difference between someone who's committed a crime and someone who's been framed for one. Stephen studied her face for a long moment. You're a law student. Yes. Where? Northwestern, 3rd year. What kind of law? Environmental, corporate responsibility, the kind of law that's supposed to hold people like... She stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. People like me. Stephen's smile was wry. In people like whoever really did this. The silence stretched between them, charged with something Bella couldn't name. She found herself studying his face, the way the coffee shop's dim lighting carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, the way his eyes seemed to hold depth she couldn't fathom. There was something almost magnetic about him, something that made her want to lean closer instead of pulling away. Miss Williams, Stephen said finally, what you're describing, a coordinated effort to frame me for environmental crimes, to plant evidence, to manipulate the media that would require resources, connections, and a level of sophistication that most people can't even imagine. And I know, if you're right, if Richard and Thomas are behind this, then you're talking about taking on some of the most powerful people in corporate America. I know. They would destroy you. His voice was flat, matter of fact. Or they would ruin your career before it started. Make sure you never practice law anywhere. Turn your life into a cautionary tale about what happens to people who cross the wrong lines. Bella felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her voice steady. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to save you. Stephen's eyes were dark, intense. You seem like a good person, Miss Williams. Someone who actually cares about justice and doing the right thing. Those are rare qualities, and they're wasted on lost causes. So you're a lost cause. I'm a billionaire who's been accused of poisoning children for profit. My own family won't speak to me. Half the country wants me in prison, and the other half wants me dead. He leaned back in his chair, his expression resigned. Yes, Miss Williams, I'm a lost cause. Something about his tone, about the weary acceptance in his voice, made Bella's chest tighten. She thought about the protesters outside his building, about the death threats he'd mentioned, about what it would feel like to have the entire world convinced you were a monster. What if you weren't? She asked quietly. What? What if you weren't a lost cause? What if there was a way to prove your innocence, to expose the real criminals, to get your life back? Stephen's laugh was harsh. That's a beautiful fantasy, but it's not a fantasy. Bella leaned forward, her voice urgent. I heard them, Mr. Moore. I heard them talking about how they framed you, about their plans for a hostile takeover, about how you'd never see it coming. That's not just hearsay. That's confession to conspiracy, to fraud, to criminal impersonation. With the right legal strategy, the right evidence, which we don't have. We have me. We have what I heard. And if they're really planning a hostile takeover, there will be a paper trail, financial records, communication logs, documentation that will prove they had motive and opportunity. Bella could feel her excitement building, her legal mind clicking into gear. This is winnable, Mr. Moore, difficult, dangerous, but winnable. Stephen was staring at her like she was speaking a foreign language. You're serious? Dead serious? You want to take on a conspiracy that could involve some of the most powerful people in America, risk your career and possibly your life, to help a man you've never met clear his name. Yes. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Bella thought about her mother in the hospital, about the bills that kept coming, about the future that seemed to be slipping away. She thought about justice and truth and the oath she'd someday take as a lawyer. But mostly, she thought about the man sitting across from her, about the weariness in his eyes and the way he'd said he was a lost cause, like he'd already given up on himself. "Because someone should," she said simply. Something changed in Stephen's expression. The mask of controlled resignation slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. "Miss Williams," he said quietly, "if you really want to help me, there's something you should know. The congressional hearings are next week. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try to expose the truth, we'll need to move fast. And it won't be enough to just prove my innocence. We'll need to prove their guilt. We'll need evidence that will hold up in court, testimony that will convince a jury, a case so airtight that even the most expensive lawyers in the world can't tear it apart." "I understand." "Do you?" Stephen's eyes locked on hers. "Because once we start this, there's no going back. They'll come after you with everything they have. They'll dig into your life, your family, your finances. They'll try to discredit you, destroy you, make you wish you'd never heard my name." Bella thought about her mother's medical bills, about the scholarships that barely covered her tuition, about the future that hung by a thread. She thought about what it would mean to take on the kind of people who had the power to ruin lives with a phone call. Then she thought about Stephen Moore, sitting alone in an office full of ghosts, carrying the weight of crimes he didn't commit. "Mr. Moore," she said, her voice steady, "I've been broke my entire life. I've been dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated by people who think my background makes me irrelevant. I've watched my mother fight for her life in a hospital system that treats people without money like they're disposable." She paused, gathering her courage. "What I'm saying is, I've got nothing left to lose. But you've got everything to gain. So the question isn't whether I'm willing to take the risk. The question is whether you're willing to fight for your innocence." Stephen stared at her for a long moment, something like amazement flickering across his features. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect? Someone looking for a payday, someone trying to take advantage of a desperate man?" His smile was small, but genuine. "Not someone willing to risk everything for a stranger. We all have our reasons for doing what we do." "What's yours?" Bella hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My mother is dying. Cancer. The medical bills are destroying us. I've been scrambling for months, taking any job I can find, applying for internships and scholarships and anything that might help us stay afloat." Stephen's expression softened. "I'm sorry. When I heard those men on the plane talking about destroying your life like it was just another business transaction, it made me sick. Because I know what it's like to be powerless, to watch your world crumble while people with money and influence decide your fate." She met his eyes. "You may be a billionaire, Mr. Moore, but right now, you're as powerless as I am. And that's not right." The coffee shop had grown even quieter around them, the other customers drifting away until it was just Bella and Stephen and the barista counting the register. "If we do this," Stephen said slowly, "if we really try to expose the truth, I can't promise it will work. I can't promise we'll win. All I can promise is that it will be the fight of our lives. I'm not afraid of fighting, and I can't let you do this for free." Stephen's voice was firm. "If you're willing to risk your future to help clear my name, then I need to make sure you have a future worth risking." Bella frowned. "What do you mean?" Stephen was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant, like he was working through a complex problem. "Your mother's medical bills," he said finally. "How much does she owe?" The question caught Bella off guard. I can't. That's not why I'm here. How much? She stared at him, her heart pounding. $127,000. And your student loans. Mr. Moore, how much? 83,000. Stephen nodded, like he was filing away the numbers. If you help me prove my innocence, I'll pay off every penny of debt you and your family owe. Medical bills, student loans, as credit cards, everything. You'll start your legal career with a clean slate. Bella felt the world tilt around her. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. That's more than $200,000. It's nothing compared to what I'll lose if I go to prison for crimes I didn't commit. Bella stared at him, her mind reeling. $200,000. Enough to save her mother's life, to give her a future, to erase years of financial stress in a single moment. There's just one condition, Stephen continued. Of course there was. What? The congressional hearings next week, they're not just about the environmental crimes. They're about my character, my fitness to run a major corporation, my ability to be trusted with other people's livelihoods. Stephen's voice was carefully controlled. And if I show up alone, if I look like an isolated, arrogant billionaire who can't even maintain relationships with the people closest to him, the narrative writes itself. I don't understand. I need you to be my girlfriend. The words hit Bella like a physical blow. What? Not really, Stephen said quickly. Just for the media, for the hearings, for public appearances. Someone smart, principled, from a different background than the usual society crowd. Someone who makes me look human. Bella felt like she was drowning. You want me to fake a relationship with you. I want you to help me save my reputation while we work to prove my innocence. The investigation could take months. During that time, I need the public to see me as someone worth saving, not just another corrupt billionaire who deserves whatever happens to him. This is insane. This is necessary. Stephen's voice was urgent now. Bella, can I call you Bella? You said you wanted justice. You said you wanted the truth to matter. This is how we make that happen. But I can't do it alone. Bella's head was spinning. Fake girlfriend. $200,000. Congressional hearings. The most powerful people in America. What exactly are you asking me to do? Attend the hearings with me. Go to a few public events. Let the media see us together. See that someone believes in my innocence enough to stand by me. Stephen's eyes were dark, intense. I'm not asking you to lie about anything important. Just let people think we're together. Let them see you as someone who knows the real me. And if we get caught, if someone finds out it's fake, then we deal with that when it happens. Stephen leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Bella, I know this sounds crazy. I know it's asking too much, but I'm desperate, and you're the first person in 6 months who's offered to help without asking for something in return. But you are asking for something in return. You're asking me to pretend to be in love with you. I'm asking you to pretend to care about me. There's a difference. Bella stared at him, at the sharp angles of his face and the weight of exhaustion in his eyes. She thought about her mother's medical bills, about the future that seemed impossible just an hour ago, about the chance to not just survive, but actually make a difference in the world. She thought about Richard Blackwood and Thomas Chen, about the casual cruelty in their voices, about the fact that they were about to destroy an innocent man and take over his company while people suffered from their crimes. If I do this, she said slowly, if I agree to this insane plan, I want to be clear about something. What? I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because it's right. The money, that's just what makes it possible. Stephen's smile was small but genuine. I understand. And I want to be involved in every aspect of the investigation. I'm not just arm candy for your congressional hearing. I'm your partner in this. Your legal counsel, your equal. If my name and reputation are on the line, then I get a say in how we proceed. Agreed? Bella took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to jump off a cliff. "Then yes, I'll help you." The relief that washed over Stephen's face was almost overwhelming. For just a moment, the controlled mask slipped completely, revealing someone younger, more vulnerable, more human than the man the media had painted him as. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything, no, but for the first time in 6 months, I feel like I might actually have a chance." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they'd just agreed to settling between them. "So what happens now?" Bella asked. Stephen glanced at his watch. "Now we get to work. The hearing is in 5 days, which means we have 5 days to build a case strong enough to create reasonable doubt. 5 days to find evidence that will prove Richard and Thomas are the real criminals. 5 days to save both our futures. Where do we start?" "We start with you moving into my apartment." Bella's eyes widened. "Excuse me? If we're going to convince people we're together, we need to be seen together, coming and going from the same building, sharing the same space." Stephen's voice was matter-of-fact, professional. "Don't worry, it's a big apartment. You'll have your own room, your own space, but we need to establish the illusion immediately. This is really happening. This is really happening." Stephen stood, extending his hand to her. "Are you ready to save my life, Bella Williams?" She looked at his outstretched hand, at the man who'd gone from stranger to partner to fake boyfriend in the span of an hour. She thought about her mother, about justice, about the chance to be part of something bigger than herself. She took his hand. "Let's go save your life, Stephen Moore." Stephen's apartment was nothing like Bella had expected. She'd imagined something cold and impersonal, all glass and steel and expensive furniture arranged by an interior designer who'd never met the person who lived there. Instead, she found herself in a space that felt surprisingly warm, surprisingly lived in, surprisingly human. The penthouse took up the entire top floor of a building overlooking Central Park, but it didn't feel ostentatious. The furniture was expensive but comfortable, the kind of pieces that invited you to actually sit in them rather than just admire them. Books were scattered across coffee tables and side tables, actual books with worn covers and dog-eared pages. A guitar leaned against the wall in one corner, and there were framed photographs scattered throughout the space, not posed professional shots, but candid moments that captured genuine emotion. "This is beautiful," Bella said, setting her single suitcase down in the entryway. "It's home." Stephen's voice was softer here, less guarded. "Or it was, anyway. I haven't spent much time here lately. Been living at the office mostly." He led her through the main living area, pointing out the kitchen, the study, the balcony that offered a breathtaking view of the city. When they reached the guest bedroom, he paused. "This is yours," he said, opening the door to reveal a room that was bigger than Bella's entire apartment. Private bathroom, walk-in closet, whatever you need. "I've had Marcus arrange for some clothes to be delivered tomorrow. We'll need you to look the part for public appearances." Bella stepped into the room, running her fingers along the silk comforter on the king-sized bed. "Stephen, this is too much." "It's necessary." He was back to his controlled, professional tone. "The media will be watching everything we do, how we dress, where we go, how we interact with each other. Every detail needs to support the narrative we're trying to create." She turned to face him, this man who'd become her fake boyfriend and legal client in the span of a few hours. In the soft lighting of the guest room, he looked different again, less like the controlled businessman from the coffee shop, more like someone who was genuinely grateful for her presence. "What's our story?" she asked. "How did we meet? How long have we been together?" "People are going to ask questions." Stephen leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "We met 3 months ago at a charity event for environmental causes. Ironic, given the accusations against me, but believable. You were volunteering. I was making a donation. We started talking about corporate responsibility and environmental law, and I was impressed by your passion and intelligence. 3 months. That's long enough to be serious, but not so long that people would have expected to know about me before now. Exactly. And it explains why you'd be willing to stand by me during the scandal. You know the real me, not just the version the media has created. Bella nodded, her mind already working through the implications. What about physical affection? Public displays of intimacy? People will expect to see some level of romantic connection. The question seemed to catch Stephen off guard. A flush of color crept up his neck, and for a moment he looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like a man who just realized he'd agreed to pretend to be in love with a woman he'd met 3 hours ago. "We'll figure that out as we go," he said finally. "Keep it natural, believable. We don't need to put on a show, just let people see that we care about each other." "Do we care about each other, I mean?" The question hung in the air between them. Stephen met her eyes, and something passed between them that Bella couldn't quite name. "I care about your willingness to help me," he said slowly. "I care about your sense of justice. I care about the fact that you're risking everything for someone you barely know. And I care about the fact that you're innocent," Bella replied. "I care about making sure the real criminals don't get away with destroying your life." They stood there for a moment, the weight of their agreement settling between them. Then Stephen's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. "Marcus," he said, answering immediately. "What is it?" Bella watched his face change as he listened, saw the color drain from his cheeks. "When?" Stephen's voice was sharp, urgent. "How many?" He hung up and turned to Bella, his expression grim. "What is it?" she asked. "Someone leaked the fact that I've been meeting with a mystery woman. The paparazzi are downstairs, and more are on the way." Stephen ran a hand through his hair. "So much for easing into this gradually. What do? We give them something to see." Stephen's voice was resigned. "Tomorrow morning, we walk out of this building together, hand in hand, looking like two people in love who have nothing to hide. Tomorrow morning, welcome to the spotlight, Bella Williams. I hope you're ready for the whole world to know your name." As if on cue, the sound of cameras clicking drifted up from the street below. Bella walked to the window and looked down to see a small crowd of photographers gathered on the sidewalk, their lenses trained on the building like weapons. "Stephen," she said quietly, "what have we gotten ourselves into?" He joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Something that's going to change both our lives," he said. "The question is whether we're strong enough to survive it." Bella looked at the cameras below, then at the man beside her, and felt the magnitude of what they'd agreed to crash over her like a wave. In 12 hours, she'd gone from broke law student to fake girlfriend of the most controversial man in America. In 5 days, she'd be sitting beside him at a congressional hearing that could determine both their futures. And somehow, standing in this room with Stephen Moore, watching the paparazzi gather like vultures below, Bella realized she'd never felt more alive. "We're going to win this," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Stephen looked at her, something like hope flickering in his dark eyes. "Yes," he said quietly, "we are." Outside, the cameras kept clicking, already writing the first chapter of a story that neither of them could control. But inside, in the warm light of Stephen's apartment, Bella Williams and Stephen Moore began planning how to rewrite the ending. The morning came too soon. Bella woke to the sound of voices drifting up from the street, reporters calling out questions to anyone who might listen, photographers positioning themselves for the perfect shot. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. She was Isabella Williams, fake girlfriend to Stephen Moore. In 3 hours, they'd walk out of this building together and officially begin the most elaborate lie of her life. A soft knock on her bedroom door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Bella, there's coffee in the kitchen when you're ready." Stephen's voice was different this morning, less assured, more uncertain, as if he'd also spent the night questioning the sanity of their arrangement. She found him standing at the kitchen counter, already dressed in dark jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes look almost black. He looked up when she entered, and she saw her own nervousness reflected in his expression. "Sleep well?" he asked, though they both knew the answer. "Like a baby," she lied, accepting the coffee mug he offered. "You?" "Best sleep I've had in months," he replied, the corner of his mouth quirking up in a slight smile. They stood there in comfortable silence, two people about to embark on the performance of their lives, finding solace in shared dishonesty. "The clothes arrived an hour ago," Stephen said, nodding towards several designer bags arranged on the kitchen island. "Marcus's assistant has excellent taste. Everything should fit." Bella examined the bags, Nordstrom, Saks, boutiques she'd only ever walked past. "How did she know my size? I may have made some educated guesses last night." Stephen's cheeks colored slightly. "Professional estimates, based on observation. You observed my clothing size. I observe everything. It's a survival skill when you're constantly being analyzed by the media." Bella rifled through the bags, finding elegant blouses, tailored pants, a coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Everything was perfect, sophisticated but not ostentatious, expensive but not flashy. The kind of clothes a serious law student who'd caught a billionaire's attention might wear. "Stephen, this is too much. It's an investment." His voice was back to business mode. "In about 2 hours, every fashion magazine in the country is going to analyze what you're wearing. We need you to look like you belong in my world." "Do I belong in your world?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He studied her face, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm hoping we can figure that out together." An hour later, Bella stood in front of the guest room mirror, barely recognizing herself. The black wool coat fit perfectly, tailored to her frame like it had been made for her. The boots added 3 inches to her height and made her feel powerful, confident. The makeup artist Stephen had summoned had worked magic with concealer and mascara, erasing the signs of her sleepless night. She looked like someone who belonged on the arm of a billionaire. She looked like someone who had never worried about medical bills or student loans or whether she could afford groceries. She looked like a lie. "Ready?" Stephen appeared in the doorway, and his reaction to her transformation was immediate and undeniable. His eyes widened slightly, and something that looked almost like surprise flickered across his features. "You look..." He paused, searching for words. "You look perfect." "I look like someone else." "You look like yourself. Just elevated." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something more intimate. "The Bella, the woman who called me last night, who was willing to risk everything for a stranger, she's still there. The clothes don't change who you are." "Don't they?" She turned back to the mirror, studying this polished version of herself. "How do we know where Isabella Williams ends and this performance begins?" "We don't." Stephen's reflection appeared behind hers in the mirror. "But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that you're strong enough to be whoever you need to be." Their eyes met in the reflection, and for a moment, Bella felt something shift between them. Something that had nothing to do with their arrangement and everything to do with the way he was looking at her. Stephen's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. "Marcus says the crowd is getting bigger," he said, checking the message. "And we should go now, before it becomes completely unmanageable." They rode the elevator down in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Bella could see the crowd through the glass lobby doors. Dozens of photographers, reporters, curious onlookers drawn by the spectacle. "Remember," Stephen said quietly, "we've been together for 3 months. We're serious about each other. You believe in my innocence completely. And I'm a man who's grateful to have someone like you in his life." He took her hand, and Bella was surprised by how natural it felt, how perfectly her fingers fit between his. "Here we go," he murmured, and pushed open the door. The noise hit them like a physical force, cameras clicking, reporters shouting questions, voices blending into an incomprehensible roar of curiosity and aggression. Stephen, who is she? Miss, what's your name? Are you the mystery woman he's been seeing? How long have you been together? Do you believe he's innocent?" Stephen's hand tightened on hers as they walked through the gauntlet, his body positioned protectively between her and the most aggressive photographers. His face was a mask of calm control, but Bella could feel the tension in his grip. "Just keep walking," he murmured. "Don't look at them." "Look at me." She did, and found herself staring into dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. For a moment, the chaos around them faded, and it was just the two of them, walking through the morning sunlight like any couple heading out for the day, except they weren't any couple. They were two people about to fool the world, and somehow, in that moment, it didn't feel like lying at all. Stephen's car was waiting at the curb, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. He opened the door for her, his hand on the small of her back as she slipped inside. The gesture was small, automatic, but it sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Oh, well," Stephen said as they pulled away from the curb, leaving the crowd behind. "That was easier than I expected." "Was it?" Bella was looking back at the photographers, who were already uploading photos and writing captions that would define her for the foreseeable future. "They got their pictures. By tonight, my face will be on every gossip website in the country." "Are you regretting this already?" She considered the question seriously. Was she? 24 hours ago, she'd been nobody, a broke law student whose biggest concern was making rent. Now she was about to become one of the most talked about women in America, all because she'd overheard a conversation on a plane. "No," she said, surprising herself. "I'm not regretting it. I'm just processing. It's a lot to process." "Stephen, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Last night, when you offered to pay my mother's medical bills, my student loans, everything, did you mean it?" "Of course I meant it." "Why?" She turned to face him fully. "I know you said it was about proving your innocence, but $200,000 is a lot of money, even for you. There had to be other people you could have asked for help." "Other ways to handle this?" Stephen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on something outside the window. "Do you want the honest answer, or the answer that makes me sound like a good person?" "Honest." "The honest answer is that I've spent 6 months surrounded by people who either want something from me or want to see me destroyed. Politicians, lawyers, journalists, board members, everyone has an agenda." He looked at her then, his expression serious. "But when you called me last night, when you told me what you'd heard, you weren't asking for anything. You were just trying to do the right thing. And that was worth $200,000 to you." "Bella, do you know what my net worth was before this scandal broke?" She shook her head. $3.2 billion. "Do you know what it will be if I go to prison for crimes I didn't commit?" "Nothing. Less than nothing. Negative, actually. Once all the lawsuits and legal fees are factored in." Stephen's smile was grim. $200,000 to ensure that I don't lose everything. That's not generosity. That's the bargain of a lifetime. "So this is just business to you?" This is survival." His voice was hard, but then it softened. "But Bella, what happened to you last night? Your willingness to help a stranger, to risk your own future for someone else's justice. That's not business. That's character, and character is something that can't be bought." The car pulled up in front of an office building in Midtown, and Bella realized their destination. "Where are we going?" "My lawyers. We need to brief them on what you heard, start building our defense strategy." Stephen's hand found hers again. "Ready to officially become part of Team Stephen Moore. I've been part of it since last night," she said. "Now I'm just making it legal." The law offices of Blackstone and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower that screamed expensive and exclusive. Bella had been in plenty of law offices during her internship searches, but nothing like this. This was where the real power players came when they needed problems to disappear. "Mr. Moore," the receptionist said the moment they walked in, "Mr. Blackstone is waiting for you in conference room A." They were escorted down a hallway lined with portraits of distinguished-looking men in expensive suits. Bella wondered if any of them had ever represented someone who was actually innocent. James Blackstone turned out to be exactly what Bella had expected: 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that came from winning cases that lesser lawyers would never even take on. What she hadn't expected was the way his eyes sharpened when he saw her. "Stephen," he said, rising from his seat at the head of a conference table, "you didn't mention you'd be bringing a guest. James, I'd like you to meet Isabella Williams." "Bella, this is James Blackstone, the best criminal defense attorney in New York. Ms. Williams." Blackstone's handshake was firm, assessing, "I understand you have information relevant to Stephen's case." "That's right. And you're also Stephen's companion." The way he said the word made it sound like something distasteful. "She's my girlfriend," Stephen said firmly, his hand moving to the small of Bella's back. "Zion, she's also going to be working with us on my defense." "Stephen, I appreciate your faith in Ms. Williams, but this is a federal criminal case, not a law school moot court competition." Bella felt her temper flare. "Mr. Blackstone, I'm a third-year law student specializing in environmental law and corporate responsibility. I've been following the Moore Industries case since it broke, and I understand the legal complexities involved better than most of your junior associates." "I'm sure you do," Blackstone said condescendingly. "But this case requires experience, not just academic knowledge. It also requires someone who believes Stephen is innocent." Bella shot back. "How many of your junior associates can say that?" Something like amusement flickered in Blackstone's eyes. "Un fair point." Stephen's hand was still on her back, and she could feel his approval in the gentle pressure of his fingers. "James," Stephen said, "Bella overheard a conversation that could blow this case wide open. I want you to hear what she has to say." For the next hour, Bella recounted every detail of the flight, every word she could remember from Richard Blackwood and Thomas Chen's conversation. Blackstone listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. "This is significant," he said when she finished. "If what you heard is accurate, it suggests a coordinated effort to frame Stephen and manipulate the board of directors." "It's more than significant," Bella said. "It's proof of a criminal conspiracy." "It's hearsay," Blackstone corrected. "Inadmissible under certain circumstances, but hardly conclusive. We'd need corroborating evidence, documents, recordings, financial records that support your account." "Then we find them," Stephen said. "Stephen, these men aren't amateurs. If they've orchestrated something this elaborate, they've covered their tracks." "Everyone makes mistakes," Bella interjected. "No conspiracy is perfect. There will be a paper trail, communication records, something that proves they had motive and opportunity." "Ms. Williams," Bella. Her voice was firm. And I'm not some starry-eyed law student who thinks justice always prevails. I know this is going to be difficult. I know they're powerful and connected and dangerous, but I also know they're not infallible. Blackstone studied her for a moment. What do you propose? We start with financial records. If they're planning a hostile takeover, there will be evidence of it, shell companies, suspicious stock purchases, communication with other board members. Thomas Chen is the CFO, which means he has access to everything. But it also means he's left fingerprints on every transaction. The FBI has already been through Moore Industries' financial records, Blackstone pointed out, looking for evidence that Stephen committed environmental crimes, Bella replied. Or they weren't looking for evidence of an internal conspiracy. Different crime, different evidence pattern. Stephen was looking at her with something that might have been admiration. She's right. James, I want you to file for discovery on all board communications for the last year. Email records, phone logs, financial disclosures, everything. That's a fishing expedition. The judge will never approve it. Then we give him a reason to approve it. Bella turned to Stephen. The congressional hearing next week, that's not just about the environmental charges, is it? They're going to question your fitness to run the company, your judgment, your leadership. That's the plan. Then we use that. We argue that the financial conspiracy is directly relevant to the environmental charges because it establishes motive for the frame-up. We can't prove Stephen's innocence without proving who actually committed the crimes. Blackstone was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of him. It's risky, he said finally. If we're wrong, if we can't prove the conspiracy, it makes Stephen look paranoid and desperate. And if we don't try, Stephen said, I go to prison for 20 years for crimes I didn't commit. James, Bella leaned forward, her voice urgent. I heard them. I heard them talking about destroying Stephen's life like it was just another business transaction. That's not the behavior of people who are just taking advantage of an existing scandal. That's the behavior of people who created the scandal. You really believe they framed him? I know they framed him. Blackstone looked between Bella and Stephen, then sighed. All right, we'll file for expanded discovery. But Ms. Williams, I hope you understand what you're getting yourself into. If Richard Blackwood and Thomas Chen are behind this, if they're willing to commit federal crimes to destroy Stephen, they won't hesitate to destroy you as well. I understand. Do you? Because once we file these motions, once we start making accusations, there's no going back. Your name will be attached to this case forever. Your reputation, your future career, your personal safety, everything will be at risk. Bella thought about her mother in the hospital, about the bills that kept coming, about the future that had seemed impossible just 24 hours ago. Then she looked at Stephen, at the man who'd offered her a chance to fight for something bigger than herself. Mr. Blackstone, she said, some things are worth the risk. They spent the rest of the day in conference rooms and legal offices, building the framework for Stephen's defense. Bella found herself slipping easily into the role of legal strategist, her 3 years of law school training finally feeling useful for something more important than passing exams. By evening, they had a plan. Blackstone would file for expanded discovery first thing Monday morning. Stephen would testify at the congressional hearing Wednesday, with Bella prominently by his side, and in the meantime, they would play the part of a couple in love, giving the media a narrative of redemption and support that might buy them the public goodwill they needed. Dinner, Stephen asked as they left Blackstone's office. There's a place I'd like to take you. Somewhere public. Very public. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place Bella had expected. Elegant, expensive, the sort of establishment where being seen was almost as important as the food. Stephen had called ahead, securing a table in the main dining room where their presence would be noted and, inevitably, photographed. Nervous? He asked as they were seated. Terrified, she admitted. You? Same. He reached across the table and took her hand, the gesture natural enough that anyone watching would assume it was genuine affection rather than calculated performance. But we're in this together now. Stephen, can I ask you something personal? I thought we were past the point of asking permission for personal questions. Before all this happened, before the scandal, what was your life like? Did you have friends, relationships, people who cared about you for reasons that had nothing to do with your money? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her knuckle. Honestly, I don't know. When you're born into money, when you inherit a company worth billions of dollars, it's hard to know who cares about you and who cares about what you can do for them. He looked up from their joined hands. My last serious relationship ended 2 years ago. She was a lawyer, brilliant, beautiful, everything I thought I wanted. What happened? I found out she was leaking information about my business deals to her clients. Not anything illegal, just advantageous. She claimed it wasn't personal, that she was just doing her job, but I realized I'd never mattered to her as anything more than a source of inside information. I'm sorry. Don't be... It taught me something important about trust. His eyes met hers, which is why what you did last night, calling me instead of going to the media, means more than you probably realize. Stephen, I know this isn't real, he said quietly, so quietly that she had to lean forward to hear him. I know you're here because I offered to pay your mother's medical bills. But for the first time in months, I don't feel completely alone. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected this dinner to be about maintaining their public facade, about being seen together by the right people. She hadn't expected genuine vulnerability. You're not alone, she said, and was surprised by how much she meant it. Bella. Sir? Their waiter had appeared, cutting off whatever Stephen had been about to say. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a gentleman at the bar who's been taking photos. Would you like me to ask him to stop? Stephen's expression hardened. No, let him take his pictures. We have nothing to hide. But as the evening progressed, Bella became increasingly aware of the attention they were drawing, whispered conversations at nearby tables, phones discreetly pointed in their direction, the kind of scrutiny that made her skin crawl. And just how do you stand it? She asked during dessert. Stand what? Being watched all the time, having every moment of your life analyzed and judged. You get used to it, or you learn to ignore it. Stephen's smile was rueful. Though I have to admit it's different when it's not just me. I'm sorry you're being dragged into this circus. I chose to be dragged into it. Did you? Or did I manipulate you into it with an offer you couldn't refuse? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to explore. Stephen, Bella said carefully, are you having second thoughts about our arrangement? Every minute of every day, he admitted. But not because I don't want your help, because I'm terrified of what this might cost you. That's my decision to make. Is it? Because right now, there are probably a dozen reporters trying to dig up everything they can find about your life, your family, your friends, your financial situation, your academic record. Nothing is off limits. As if summoned by his words, Bella's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Williams, this is Janet Rodriguez from the New York Post. I'd love to talk to you about your relationship with Stephen Moore. Please call me. Then another, Bella, TMZ here, interested in telling your side of the story. And another, Isabella Williams, Washington Times. Can we chat about how you met Mr. Moore? Oh, God, Bella whispered, staring at her phone as more messages poured in. It's starting, Stephen said grimly. Bella, if you want to back out, if this is too much... No, she put her phone away, her voice firm. No, I'm not backing out. But Stephen, I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me that when this is over, when you're cleared and the real criminals are exposed, you won't disappear from my life like none of this ever happened. The request seemed to surprise him. What do you mean? I mean that in a few weeks or months, you'll be a billionaire again, and I'll be a law student again, and our lives will go back to being completely different. Promise me that you won't just forget about me. Stephen stared at her, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. Bella, he said quietly, I don't think forgetting about you is going to be possible. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. For a moment, sitting in this expensive restaurant with cameras flashing in the background and reporters texting her phone, none of it felt like performance. For a moment, it felt real. 3 days later, Bella stood in front of the bathroom mirror in Stephen's apartment, trying to calm her nerves. In 2 hours, they would walk into the congressional hearing room together. In 2 hours, Stephen would testify before a panel of senators while the entire country watched. In 2 hours, their fake relationship would face its biggest test yet. Bella? Stephen's voice came through the bathroom door. And there's something you need to see. She found him in the living room, standing in front of the enormous television with a remote in his hand. On the screen was a news anchor, her expression serious as she read from a teleprompter. New developments in the Stephen Moore scandal. Sources close to the investigation tell CNN that Moore has been paying law student Isabella Williams to pose as his girlfriend in an attempt to rehabilitate his public image. Bella's blood turned to ice. The source, who spoke on condition of anonymity, claims that Williams was recruited specifically because of her background in environmental law and her clean public image. The arrangement allegedly includes payment of Williams's student loans and her mother's substantial medical debt. Oh God, Bella whispered. According to these sources, the relationship is entirely fabricated, designed to make Moore appear more sympathetic during this week's congressional hearings. Williams, who has no comment on the allegations, was reportedly chosen because her genuine belief in Moore's innocence would make the deception more convincing. Stephen turned off the television, his face ashen. How? Bella's voice was barely a whisper. How did they know? I don't know. The only people who knew about our arrangement were you, me, and Marcus. Stephen ran a hand through his hair, his controlled demeanor finally cracking. Unless what? Unless someone's been monitoring my communications, my phones, my emails, my apartment. Stephen's voice was getting harder, angrier. Bella, what if this whole thing has been a setup from the beginning? What if they wanted me to find you, wanted me to make this arrangement so they could expose it at exactly the right moment? The implications hit Bella like a physical blow. The congressional hearing is in 2 hours, and now I'm going to walk in there looking like a man who's so desperate he's paying women to pretend to love him. Stephen's laugh was bitter. Game over. They've won. Bella stared at the blank television screen, her mind racing. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd planned, it was all falling apart. Her phone rang. Her mother. Sweetheart. Her mother's voice was tired, confused. There are reporters outside the hospital. They're asking me about some arrangement you made with that billionaire on the news. Bella, what's going on? Mom, They're saying you took money from him to pretend to be his girlfriend. They're saying you lied to everyone, including me. Her mother's voice broke slightly. Please tell me that's not true. Bella closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every choice she'd made crashing down on her. Mom, I can explain. Just tell me. Is it true? The silence stretched between them, filled with everything Bella couldn't say. Yes, she whispered finally. It's true." The line went quiet for so long that Bella thought her mother had hung up. "Why?" The word was barely audible. "Because I was desperate, because the bills were crushing us and I didn't know what else to do, and he offered to help and I thought—" Bella's voice broke. "I thought I could help him and help us at the same time, by lying to me, by trying to save your life. Bella, I would rather die than have you compromise everything you believe in for my medical bills." The words hit Bella harder than any accusation, any media attack, any threat from powerful men in expensive suits. "Mom, I have to go. The reporters are coming back." The line went dead. Bella stood there holding her phone, feeling like her world was collapsing around her. Stephen was pacing behind her, his own phone ringing constantly as reporters and lawyers and crisis management specialists all demanded answers. "We have to cancel," Stephen said finally. "I can't go to that hearing now, not with this hanging over me." "No." Bella's voice was stronger than she felt. "No, we don't cancel. Bella, they've destroyed us. My credibility is shot, your reputation is ruined, and we still don't have any proof that Richard and Thomas are behind the environmental crimes." "Then we make our own proof." Stephen stopped pacing. "What?" "The hearing is in 2 hours. Richard Blackwood will be there. He's one of the senators questioning you. If he's really behind this frame-up, if he's really trying to destroy you to take over your company, then he'll try to use this revelation to humiliate you completely." "So?" "So we let him." Bella turned to face Stephen, her mind clicking into gear. "We let him think he's won. We let him get overconfident, let him reveal more than he intended, and we record every word." "Bella, that's dangerous, crazy." "Possibly illegal." She moved closer to him, her voice urgent. "Stephen, they've already destroyed our reputations. They've already made us look like criminals and liars. What do we have left to lose?" "Everything." "No, we have nothing left to lose and everything to gain." Bella reached for his hands, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. "You said you've been alone for months. You said everyone around you either wants something from you or wants to see you destroyed, but I'm still here. You're here because I paid you to be here. I'm here because you're innocent. I'm here because someone needs to fight for the truth. And yes, I'm here because you offered to help my family when no one else would." Her grip on his hands tightened. "But Stephen, I'm also here because in the last 3 days, I've gotten to know the real you. The man who plays guitar in the corner of his living room. The man who has actual books with dog-eared pages. The man who was willing to trust a stranger because she was the first person in months to treat him like a human being instead of a symbol. Bella, the arrangement we made Monday night, that was business. But this," she gestured between them, "this is something else. And if Richard Blackwood thinks he can destroy that with leaked information and media manipulation, then he doesn't understand what he's really fighting." Stephen stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "You really want to do this? Walk into that hearing room knowing they'll tear us apart? I want to walk into that hearing room and show them that we're stronger than they think we are." Stephen's smile was slow, genuine, and devastating. "In that case, Ms. Williams, let's go save my life. Let's go save both our lives." As they prepared to leave for the hearing, Bella caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirror. They looked like what they'd been pretending to be, two people who cared about each other, who were facing an impossible situation together. The only difference was that now, looking at Stephen's face, seeing the way he looked at her, Bella wasn't entirely sure it was pretending anymore. The congressional hearing room was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was filled with reporters, lawyers, government officials, and curious members of the public who'd managed to secure passes to what was being billed as the trial of the century. Bella walked down the aisle beside Stephen, her hand in his, acutely aware of every camera trained on them, every whispered conversation that stopped as they passed. The leaked story about their arrangement had dominated the morning news, and she could feel the weight of public judgment pressing down on her like a physical force. But she kept her head high, her steps steady, her expression calm. Whatever happened in the next few hours, she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Stephen squeezed her hand as they took their seats at the witness table, a gesture that felt more supportive than performative. "Ready?" he murmured. "Ready!" Senator Richard Blackwood called the hearing to order, his silver hair gleaming under the television lights, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never doubted his own righteousness. "We're here today," he began, "to examine the environmental crimes allegedly committed by Moore Industries and its CEO, Stephen Moore. Crimes that have affected thousands of families, poisoned drinking water, and violated the public trust." Bella watched Blackwood carefully, looking for any sign that he was more than just a concerned senator. But his performance was flawless. Concerned, authoritative, genuinely committed to finding the truth. "Mr. Moore," Blackwood continued, "before we begin discussing the specific environmental charges, I think the American people deserve to know about some disturbing allegations that have come to light regarding your character and integrity." Here it comes, Bella thought. "Is it true that you've been paying Mrs. Isabella Williams to pose as your girlfriend in an attempt to rehabilitate your public image?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Bella felt Stephen tense beside her, felt the weight of every eye in the room focused on their table. "Senator," Stephen said carefully, "my relationship with Ms. Williams. It's a simple question, Mr. Moore. Have you or have you not paid Mrs. Williams to pretend to be romantically involved with you?" Stephen looked at Bella, something passing between them in that glance. Then he turned back to the microphone. "Senator, yes, I offered to pay Miss Williams's debts in exchange for her help with my legal defense and her public support during this ordeal." A murmur went through the crowd. Camera flashes exploded. Reporters frantically typed notes. "So you admit to deceiving the American people about the nature of your relationship?" "I admit to making an arrangement with someone I trusted, someone who believed in my innocence when no one else would. Mr. Moore," another senator interjected, "doesn't this kind of deception call into question your credibility regarding the environmental charges? If you're willing to lie about your personal relationships, how can we trust anything you say about your business practices?" "Because," Bella said, rising from her seat, "the relationship stopped being fake 3 days ago." The room erupted. Senators called for order. Reporters shouted questions. Blackwood banged his gavel repeatedly. "Ms. Williams," Blackwood said when the noise died down, "you're not scheduled to testify today." "Then I'd like to request permission to make a statement." "Ms. Williams, you're not qualified. I'm a third-year law student who's been studying environmental law for 3 years. I'm the person who first brought information about this case to Mr. Moore's attention. And I'm the person who's been working with his legal team to uncover the truth about who really committed these crimes." Bella's voice was clear, strong, carrying easily through the hearing room. "I think that makes me qualified to speak." Blackwood looked like he wanted to refuse, but the media attention was too intense, the public interest too high. "Very well. You may make a brief statement." Bella stepped up to the microphone, acutely aware that her words were being broadcast live across the country. 3 days ago, I was a broke law student whose biggest concern was paying my mother's medical bills. Today, I'm being called a liar and a fraud by people who've never met me, never spoken to me, never tried to understand why I made the choices I made. She paused, gathering her courage. Yes, I made an arrangement with Stephen Moore. Yes, he offered to help with my family's debts in exchange for my support. But what the media isn't telling you is why I was willing to help him in the first place. Miss Williams, Blackwood tried to interrupt. I overheard a conversation on a flight from Chicago to New York, a conversation between two men discussing how they had framed Stephen Moore for environmental crimes he didn't commit. A conversation about destroying his life and taking over his company. The room was dead silent now. One of those men was Thomas Chen, Moore Industries' chief financial officer. The other was a board member who had access to all of Stephen's authorization codes, his digital signatures, his personal files. Bella looked directly at Blackwood, watching his face carefully. Senator Blackwood, you've been very concerned about Stephen's credibility, about his character, about whether he can be trusted. But what about the credibility of the people who are accusing him? What about their motives? What about the possibility that the real criminals are sitting in this room right now? Blackwood's face had gone very pale, but his voice remained steady. Ms. Williams, these are very serious accusations you're making. Yes, they are. Just like the accusations being made against Stephen are serious, the difference is, I have evidence. That was a lie. They didn't have evidence yet, but Bella was betting that Blackwood didn't know that. What evidence? Another senator asked. Financial records showing suspicious stock purchases and shell company formations in the weeks leading up to the environmental story breaking. Communication logs between board members discussing the frame-up. Documentation proving that someone with high-level access planted the evidence that made Stephen look guilty. Bella was making it up as she went along, but she watched Blackwood's face carefully as she spoke. And there, just for a moment, she saw something that looked like panic flicker across his features. Senator Blackwood, she said, addressing him directly, you seem very invested in proving Stephen's guilt. Almost like you have a personal stake in seeing him destroyed. Is there something you'd like to share with the committee about your relationship with Thomas Chen, about your involvement with Moore Industries' board, about your plans for a hostile takeover once Stephen is out of the picture? Miss Williams, these accusations are completely unfounded. Are they? Because I have recordings. Another lie, but this time Blackwood's reaction was unmistakable. His face went white, his hands clenched on the table in front of him, and for just a moment the mask of senatorial authority slipped completely. I demand that this hearing be suspended, pending investigation of these allegations, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. On what grounds? The committee chair asked. On the grounds that Miss Williams is clearly lying in a desperate attempt to save her boyfriend's reputation. How do you know I'm lying, Senator? Bella asked quietly. How can you be so certain that recordings don't exist unless you know exactly what they would contain? The silence in the room was deafening, and then, from the back of the hearing room, came a voice that made Bella's blood run cold. Because, Ms. Williams, we made sure no recordings existed. Thomas Chen stood up from his seat in the gallery, his face calm, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. Richard, shut up, he said to Blackwood. She's bluffing. How do you know? Bella asked, her heart pounding. Because we swept that plane for surveillance devices, because we checked the passenger manifests, because we're not amateurs. Chen's smile was cold, confident. You heard us talking, yes, but you have no proof, no recordings, no evidence, just your word against ours. Thomas, Blackwood's voice was a warning. No, Richard, I'm tired of this charade, tired of pretending that Stephen Moore is anything other than exactly what we've made him appear to be, a criminal who got caught. Chen looked directly at Stephen. You never deserved the company, Stephen. You never earned it. You inherited it from your father, and you were too weak, too idealistic, too concerned with doing the right thing to use it properly. So you decided to take it from him, Bella said. We decided to give it to someone who would use it correctly. Someone who understood that business is about profit, not environmental regulations and worker safety and all the other bleeding heart causes that Stephen wasted company resources on. By framing him for environmental crimes, by making sure the right story got told. Chen's voice was getting louder, more confident. Those environmental violations, they happened, not under Stephen's watch, but they happened. We just adjusted the timeline. Made sure Stephen's name was on the right documents, made sure his authorization codes were used, made sure the evidence pointed where it needed to point. The room was in chaos now. Reporters were shouting questions, senators were calling for order, and security guards were moving toward Chen. But Bella only had eyes for Stephen, who was staring at Chen with an expression of complete shock. You killed people, Stephen said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the noise. The contamination in Ohio, the poisoning in Michigan, people died because of what you covered up. People die every day, Chen replied. At least their deaths served a purpose. That was when Bella realized that Stephen had been recording the entire conversation on his phone. They had their evidence. The aftermath of the hearing was a blur of arrests, emergency sessions, and media coverage that dominated every news channel in the country. Thomas Chen was taken into custody on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to manslaughter. Richard Blackwood resigned from the Senate and disappeared into his legal team's protective custody. And Stephen Moore, for the first time in 6 months, was no longer the most hated man in America. So what happens now? Bella asked. They were back in Stephen's apartment, finally alone after hours of debriefings and legal consultations. Now we wait for the trials. Now we rebuild. Now we figure out how to move forward. Stephen looked exhausted, but there was something lighter in his expression, something that hadn't been there before. Bella, what you did today, we did. What we did was impossible and perfect. And probably insane. Bella laughed, feeling giddy with relief and adrenaline. Definitely insane. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Stephen, Bella said finally, about our arrangement. What about it? It's over, isn't it? I mean, you don't need a fake girlfriend anymore. Your reputation is cleared. The real criminals are exposed. Your company is safe. Stephen was quiet for a long moment. Bella, he said finally, when you stood up in that hearing room today, when you faced down some of the most powerful people in America, when you risked everything to fight for the truth, that wasn't fake. No, it wasn't. And when I watched you do it, when I realized that someone was finally fighting for me, not because of what I could give them, but because of who I am, that wasn't fake either. Stephen, I know we started this as an arrangement. I know it was supposed to be business. But Bella, somewhere in the last week, it stopped being business for me. She looked at him, at this man who'd gone from stranger to client to something she couldn't quite name, and felt her heart skip. What are you saying? I'm saying that our fake relationship just became the most real thing in my life. Bella stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Are you asking me to stay? I'm asking you to start over. No arrangements, no contracts, no fake anything, just us, if you want there to be an us. Bella thought about everything that had brought them to this moment: the overheard conversation, the desperate proposition, the media circus, the congressional hearing that had changed both their lives. She thought about her mother, whose medical bills would be paid, about her future, which was no longer limited by crushing debt, about the career she could build, the life she could create, the possibilities that stretched out before her like an open road. And she thought about Stephen, who'd trusted her with his life, his reputation, his heart. "Yes," she said simply, "I want there to be an us." When he kissed her, it was nothing like the careful, performative touches they'd shared for the cameras. It was real and desperate and full of everything they'd been holding back for days. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find, something that no amount of money could buy and no conspiracy could destroy, something that was entirely, completely, perfectly real. 3 weeks after the congressional hearing, Bella woke up in Stephen's bed for the first time without feeling like she was trespassing. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden patterns across the sheets where Stephen lay sleeping beside her. His face was peaceful in a way she'd never seen before. No tension in his jaw, no furrow between his brows, no weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. For the first time in months, Stephen Moore looked like a man who could sleep through the night. Bella slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him. The apartment felt different now, warmer, more lived in, more like a home and less like a museum. Her law books were scattered across the coffee table. Her coffee mug sat in the sink next to his, and her shoes were kicked off by the front door in a way that suggested permanence rather than temporary arrangement. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw the 60 Minutes interview last night. You looked beautiful, sweetheart, and happy." Bella smiled. The interview had been Stephen's idea, a chance to tell their real story, to explain how a fake arrangement had become something genuine. The reporter had been skeptical at first, clearly expecting a carefully crafted PR narrative, but by the end of the hour, even she seemed convinced that what existed between Bella and Stephen was authentic. "And how does it feel," the reporter had asked, "to know that your relationship was born out of one of the biggest scandals in recent history?" "It feels like the best thing that ever happened to me," Bella had answered, and meant every word. Now, 3 weeks later, the media attention was finally starting to die down. Stephen's company was recovering, his reputation was restored, and the trials of Richard Blackwood and Thomas Chen were proceeding exactly as their lawyers had hoped. Everything should have felt perfect. So why did Bella wake up every morning with a nagging sense that something was missing? "You're up early." Stephen's voice was rough with sleep as he appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing nothing but pajama pants and a smile that still made her breath catch. "Couldn't sleep." She handed him a mug of coffee, their fingers brushing in a way that sent warmth up her arm. "Too much on my mind." "Good thoughts or bad thoughts?" "Complicated thoughts." Stephen studied her face, the same intense attention he'd always paid to her emotions. It was one of the things she'd grown to love about him, the way he actually listened, actually cared about what was going on inside her head. "Want to talk about it?" Bella leaned against the kitchen counter, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like an anchor. "Stephen, what happens when the trials are over, when the media moves on to the next scandal? When your company is completely back to normal and my law school graduation is just a few months away?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what happens to us when we don't need each other anymore?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to examine too closely. "Bella," Stephen said quietly, setting down his coffee and moving closer to her, "is that what you think this is? That we only work because we needed each other?" "I don't know what I think." The words came out more vulnerable than she'd intended. Stephen, 3 weeks ago we were fighting for your life, fighting for the truth, fighting against people who wanted to destroy us. We were bonded by crisis, by shared danger, by the adrenaline of surviving something impossible together. And now the crisis is over. The danger is gone. The impossible thing we survived is behind us. Bella looked up at him, her heart pounding. What if we were just good at being partners in battle? What if we don't know how to be partners in peace? Stephen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Are you having doubts about us? I'm having doubts about whether us can exist outside of extraordinary circumstances. Bella. Stephen, look at our lives. Really look at them. You're a billionaire CEO who owns half of Manhattan. I'm a law student who's going to graduate with no debt thanks to you, but also no idea what I actually want to do with my life. You want to practice environmental law. You want to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Do I? Or do I just think I do, because that's what brought us together? Bella's voice was getting stronger, more insistent. Stephen, how do I know what I really want when everything I have now is because of you? The pain that flickered across Stephen's face was almost unbearable to watch. Are you saying you regret our arrangement? I'm saying I don't know who I am outside of it. Stephen turned away from her, his shoulders tense. So what are you asking for? Space, time, a chance to figure out who you are without me? I'm asking for the chance to choose you because I want to, not because I need to. And how exactly do we do that? Bella took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to suggest would hurt both of them. I think I should move out. Stephen felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Move out. Temporarily, Bella said quickly, as if that made it better. Just until I figure out who I am, when I'm not defined by my relationship with you. Bella, we live together because we want to live together, not because of any arrangement or contract or... Do we? Or do we live together because it's what we got used to during the crisis? Stephen stared at her, this woman who'd saved his life and stolen his heart, and felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. The same feeling he'd had when his ex-girlfriend had revealed her true motives. The same feeling he'd had when his family had abandoned him during the scandal. The feeling of being fundamentally alone. Fine, he said, his voice carefully controlled. If that's what you want... Stephen, no, I understand. You want to make sure you're choosing me for the right reasons. You want to make sure this is real. His smile was sharp, bitter. And it's a reasonable request. It is real. That's not what I'm questioning. Isn't it? Because it sounds like you're questioning everything. Bella moved toward him, her hand reaching out. But Stephen stepped back. Stephen, please. I'm not saying I don't love you. I'm saying I want to love you from a position of strength, not need. And you can't do that while living with me. I don't know. That's what I need to find out. Stephen turned away from her, looking out at the city that had once seemed like his kingdom and now felt like a reminder of everything he stood to lose. How long? He asked quietly. I don't know. A week? A month? A year? Stephen, how long, Bella? Until I'm sure. Sure of what? Sure that I'm staying because I want to build a life with you, not because I'm grateful for the life you've given me. Stephen closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every choice that had led them to this moment. You know what the ironic thing is, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What? 3 months ago, I would have said that kind of certainty was impossible. That love was always mixed up with need and gratitude and convenience and a dozen other complicated motivations. He turned to face her. You taught me that it could be simple, that it could be pure, that someone could choose to love me just because of who I am, Stephen. And now you're telling me that what we have isn't pure enough. That it's contaminated by circumstances and gratitude and need. That's not what I'm saying, isn't it? They stared at each other across the kitchen, the distance between them feeling vast despite the few feet of space. "I'll have Marcus help you find an apartment," Stephen said finally, his voice back to the controlled, professional tone she remembered from their first meeting. "Something nice, safe, close to school. Stephen, please don't shut me out." "I'm not shutting you out. I'm giving you what you asked for." "What I asked for was understanding. And what I'm giving you is space." Stephen's smile was cold, distant. "All the space you need to figure out who you are without me." Bella found an apartment in the village 3 days later. A tiny one-bedroom with exposed brick walls and windows that looked out onto a tree-lined street. It was nothing like Stephen's penthouse, but it was hers in a way that felt both liberating and terrifying. Stephen had insisted on paying the first year's rent, despite her protests. "Consider it a loan," he'd said, his tone carefully neutral. "You can pay me back when you start practicing law." They'd barely spoken since their conversation in the kitchen. Stephen was polite, helpful, distant, everything she'd asked for, and nothing she'd actually wanted. "You're an idiot," her mother said when Bella called to tell her about the move. "Thanks for the support, Mom." "Bella, that man loves you, really, genuinely loves you, and you're walking away because you're scared." "I'm not walking away. You're just what? Testing him, seeing if he'll fight for you, seeing if he'll prove his love by chasing after you." The accuracy of the observation stung. "It's not about testing him, Mom. It's about making sure I know who I am." "Sweetheart, nobody knows who they are. We're all just figuring it out as we go along." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "The question isn't whether you know who you are. The question is whether you're willing to figure it out together. But what if you're only with him because he helped us? What if he's only with you because you saved his reputation? What if? Her mother sighed. "Bella, love isn't about perfect understanding or pure motivations. It's about choosing someone every day for whatever messy, complicated reasons you have, and trusting them to choose you back. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Everything else is just fear." After she hung up, Bella sat in her empty apartment, surrounded by boxes she hadn't unpacked, and wondered if her mother was right. Her phone buzzed with a text from Stephen. "Hope the move went smoothly. Let me know if you need anything." She stared at the message for a long time, then typed and deleted a dozen different responses. Finally, she settled on, "Thank you. The apartment is perfect." His response came immediately, "Good." And that was it. No follow-up questions, no attempts to continue the conversation, no indication that he missed her or wanted her back or was fighting for their relationship in any way, which was exactly what she'd asked for, and exactly what was breaking her heart. Stephen threw himself into work with the kind of single-minded intensity that had built his company in the first place. 16-hour days, back-to-back meetings, a schedule so packed that he barely had time to think about the empty apartment waiting for him at home. "Sir," Marcus said, appearing in his office doorway with a concerned expression, "it's 10 o'clock at night. Maybe you should go home." "I'm fine." "You've been here since 6 this morning. You haven't eaten anything since the bagel I brought you 12 hours ago. And you've been staring at the same contract for the last half hour without actually reading it." Stephen looked down at the papers in front of him, realizing Marcus was right. The words had been swimming together for the better part of an hour. "I said I'm fine." "Stephen." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "She's been gone for 2 weeks. When are you going to call her?" "I'm not going to call her." "Why not?" "Because she asked for space. She asked for time to figure out who she is without me. I'm respecting that request." "Are you? Or are you punishing her for having doubts?" Stephen's head snapped up. "What?" Stephen, in the entire time I've worked for you, I've never seen you as happy as you were with Bella, and I've never seen you shut down as completely as you have since she moved out. Marcus, she didn't break up with you. She didn't say she didn't love you. She said she needed to make sure she was choosing you for the right reasons. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. That sounds like someone who cares enough about your relationship to want to make sure it's built on solid ground. Or it sounds like someone who's looking for an excuse to leave. Do you really believe that? Stephen was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his desk. Maybe I don't know what I believe anymore. Stephen, what are you afraid of? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? I mean, what's the worst-case scenario here? Bella takes some time, figures out who she is, and decides she doesn't want to be with you. Yes. And if that happens, you'll survive it. You'll be hurt, but you'll survive it. Marcus moved closer. But what if the worst-case scenario is that Bella figures out who she is and decides she does want to be with you? But by then, you've convinced her that you don't care enough to fight for her. Stephen stared at him. What if she's sitting in that apartment right now, wondering why you let her go so easily? What if she's interpreting your respect for her space as indifference? What if she needed you to fight for her, and instead you're giving her exactly what she said she wanted? She was very clear about what she wanted. Stephen, women say a lot of things when they're scared. The trick is figuring out what they mean. And what do you think she meant? I think she meant that she loves you so much, it terrifies her. I think she meant that she wants to make sure she's worthy of you. I think she meant that she's never had anything good in her life that wasn't taken away, and she's scared that if she doesn't somehow earn this, it won't last. The words hit Stephen like a revelation. You think she's scared? I think you're both scared, and instead of being scared together, you're being scared apart, which is about the stupidest thing I've ever seen two intelligent people do. Stephen leaned back in his chair, feeling something shift in his chest. What would you do, Marcus, if you were in my position? I'd stop respecting her space and start fighting for her. And if she really does need time to figure herself out, then I'd help her figure it out. Together. Bella was grading papers for the professor she worked for when the flowers arrived. 24 white roses, elegant and simple, with a card that read, "For someone who's figuring out who she is." She stared at the card for a long time, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. The flowers kept coming, every day for a week. Never with a message asking her to come back. Never with declarations of love or demands for her attention. Just simple acknowledgements of her existence, reminders that he was thinking of her. On Thursday, it was a book, a collection of essays by environmental lawyers she'd mentioned wanting to read. On Friday, it was coffee from her favorite shop, delivered to her apartment still warm. On Saturday, it was a letter. Dear Bella. It began in Stephen's precise handwriting. I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to choose me from a position of strength rather than need. I want you to know that I understand that impulse. I respect it. And I want to help you find that strength, even if it means risking the possibility that you'll choose someone else. Bella's hands were shaking as she continued reading. I've realized that I fell in love with you not because you needed me, but because you didn't. You were the first person in my life who wanted to help me without asking for anything in return. You were the first person who saw me as someone worth saving rather than someone worth using. But I also realized that I've never told you who you are to me outside of our crisis. I've never told you what I see when I look at you when we're not fighting for our lives. I see someone who's brilliant and brave and absolutely uncompromising when it comes to doing the right thing. I see someone who can walk into a room full of the most powerful people in America and make them listen to her because she believes in truth more than she fears consequences. And I see someone who loves her mother so fiercely that she was willing to risk everything to save her. Someone who loves justice so passionately that she was willing to help a stranger prove his innocence. I see someone who deserves to be chosen every day, not because she needs it, but because she's extraordinary. Take all the time you need, Bella. Figure out who you are. Figure out what you want. But know that whoever you become, whatever you choose, I will be grateful for the privilege of having loved you. Yours, if you want me, Stephen. Bella read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Stephen was in his study when the doorbell rang, working on a proposal for a new environmental initiative that Moore Industries was launching. He'd been pouring himself into the project for the last week, finding purpose in the kind of work that had originally drawn him to business, making a positive difference, using his resources to solve problems that mattered. He wasn't expecting visitors. Marcus had left hours ago, and Stephen hadn't made social plans since. Well, since Bella had moved out. He opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, her hair wind-blown from the cold, her cheeks flushed, his letter clutched in her hand. "Hi," she said breathlessly. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Stephen was afraid to hope, afraid to assume, afraid to do anything that might send her running again. "Can I come in?" "Of course." She followed him into the living room, the same space where they'd planned his defense, where they'd practiced their testimony, where they'd fallen in love without either of them quite realizing it was happening. "Stephen," she began, then stopped, as if she'd lost her words. "Take your time. I've been an idiot. Bella. No, let me say this. I've been an idiot, and I've been scared, and I've been so focused on trying to figure out who I am that I forgot the most important thing." "What's that?" "I know who I am when I'm with you." Her voice was stronger now, more certain. "I'm someone who's brave enough to fight for what's right. I'm someone who's smart enough to see through lies and manipulation. I'm someone who's strong enough to stand up to the most powerful people in the world. You were all of those things before you met me. Maybe. But I didn't believe it until you showed me." Bella stepped closer to him. "Stephen, I don't love you because you saved my family's finances. I don't love you because you gave me opportunities I never would have had otherwise. I don't even love you because you're a good man who was wrongly accused. Why do you love me? I love you because when I'm with you, I become the best version of myself. I love you because you listen to me like my thoughts matter. I love you because you trust me with your life, your reputation, your heart." She was close enough now that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "I love you because you let me choose you every day, and you choose me back, Bella. I know who I am, Stephen. I'm the woman who's going to spend the rest of her life fighting for justice and truth, and people who can't fight for themselves. I'm the woman who's going to use her law degree to make a real difference in the world." She reached for his hands. "Adieu, and I'm the woman who wants to do all of that with you by my side." Stephen felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that I love you. I'm sure that I want to build a life with you. I'm sure that I want to choose you every day for the rest of my life." Her smile was radiant, transformative, everything else we can figure out together.